My name is Mark McGreevy, and the title of my show is Flop Sweat. The definition of flop sweat, for me, I suppose it's like a change in one's mindset that can cause anxiety, a confusion, a kind of opening up of the foundations of of your thinking. The general foundations of things kind of disappear, and it comes from maybe, I think the proper English dictionary definition is something to do with performance anxiety, but I always seen it as something to do more with like a kind of come down anxiety or a hangover anxiety. So, which kind of leads me to think it's like a slight tweak or twist on the reality of the person who's experiencing it. And I think maybe that's what happens in my paintings, that there's a slight tweak or twist on the reality that you're looking at. Drawn is probably a way for me to negotiate my own existence, I suppose. So it's a constant in my life. It's a constant when I get home from the studio, or if I'm at work, and when I come home from work, I will usually be working, drawn in sketchbooks or on A4 paper or whatever like that. So that is, I suppose it's almost like someone writing in a diary. Instead of writing in a diary, I draw. And in a way, then that is the basis for what comes later, which probably is more performative in the painting. So the painting would be more a performative way of working, and the drawing is actually just it's like getting up, eating, sleeping, drinking. What I mean by the performative element of painting is it's not natural for me. It's not a natural gift. I feel anxious and exposed sometimes when I'm painting as well, which I don't get at all when I'm drawing. So there's like this huge disparity between one and the other, between the painting and the drawing. So I think that leads to maybe a strangeness in the overall depiction of the painting, or the overall look, just the physical outcome. It can be awkward, and it can be sometimes unpleasant, or there's an ugliness to it as well. But that's something that I don't really mind. It kind of reminds me of like a lived-in face, like a lived-in body, a lived-in mind, and not like a more and more, what we've talked about before, like a kind of Instagram version of reality where things are sanitized and clean, and I try to make them the opposite of that. I suppose what I want is this kind of messiness of existence and the desanitization of existence as well. I find that, and maybe it's something to do with keeping the idea of painting alive as well, because there's something analogy about painting that is disappearing through the presentation of how we see painting. Very few people actually see shows. Mostly it's through say art books are online now. So everything has a kind of a back glow. It's flat. It has a back glow. It's seductive, and when you see a lot of these paintings in reality, they're not. Some of them are quite dry, quite dirty. They're physically rotten. Falling apart. Bits are falling apart. I seen some of Vuillard's paintings last year, and you could see that they were discoloring because he had mixed the pigment with rabbit skin glue, so it was starting to literally fall apart. So this is the history of painting, and I suppose in a way I kind of have this conservative love for that past as well, and not to lose that past. The areas that I paint, the landscapes that I paint, they're not really landscapes at all. They're I suppose they're mindscapes. They're interiors. They're interior spaces. Something that I was really influential over the last few years was it's an old 1968 40-minute omnibus on BBC Two, and it's of M.R. James whistling "And I'll Come to You," and it stars James Harden as a professor who finds a kind of flute in like a sand dune. He picks it up, he blows into it. In Latin, written on it is, "Who is this that is coming?" And he's kind of a pompous, full of hubris, a rationalist, and as he blows the flute, he goes to bed, and the next day comes up and goes about his business, but something starts to change. It's presented as a haunting, but it's also it could be a physical haunting, physical manifestation, but I see it as a kind of interior haunting, and the idea of the rational mind is probably a phantom as well. And I think that is maybe what would be one of the underlying threads in my work, is the idea of rationalization and possibly progression. Could be a phantom. How that feeds into some of the painting. I think some of the characters in them are in precarious situations, maybe similar to what we were talking about with some of those stories. I think I have sympathy for the characters as well, or maybe some of the people that exist in my paintings. One of them has a woman, I think the title is called Cold Caller into the Nature, but originally I was going to call it Yoga Teacher into the Nature, where she's kind of like dangling a crystal into like a kind of a declivity, a void, and the person really exists, the declivity really exists, or a version of them exists, which I sat down and drew, and I just worked from memory from this particular person. But what I found interesting was the strange beliefs that she had, but then you had the material nature of nature, and how these two rub up against one another. And I don't know if I was successful in it. I kind of painted it slightly in I hesitate to say twee, but maybe it's bordering on a kind of tweeness to how she's depicted. But I think it's a theme that I want to continue with, this idea of, I suppose it's an interior versus, the interior mind versus the material existence or outside. I can't really say the material reality, because I think that's an impossibility to know as being human. Painting is something that you certainly I would do, is beat myself up more over. And I don't mean this in any kind of heroic sense or anything. It's just something that happens, and I wish it wouldn't. You know, I would love to be able to paint exactly the way I feel, or feel when I'm painting the exact same way I do when I'm drawing. But unfortunately that doesn't happen.